Another fun-filled day of excuses for me to go and make stupid comments about everything else going on in the world today. Of course, insane new Dasher update. Yeah, it's always interesting. I really need to step up and get back on to DoorDash so I can make real comments about how it is on DoorDash because it's really been about 3 years from actually working the dash consistently.
What is going on, everyone? My name is Pete, and you guys are watching Pay to Drive and Pay to Drive vlogs. Hope you guys are doing fantastic out there. If you drive for apps like Eats or any of the others, you, my friends, are in the right place to stay up to date with what's going on in the gig economy. So get
Why does it always look like they're trying to make circuit boards with all these things? Come on, it looks like a processor pad.
for free. Hit that red subscribe button down below. Turn on all notifications. So if you wouldn't mind, hit that like button down below. Just lets YouTube know if you're
Nope.
a comment right now saying liked.
Nope.
And let's jump into drivers and dashers. Got another interesting email to go over. Now, let me just give a disclaimer, as I do on a lot of these videos. Keep in mind, this is only from one dasher's perspective. You in your particular
Yeah, at that point, I am tired.
The TikTok DoorDash girl filmed a naked man passed out inside his own home and then posted it for nearly 30 million people to see, and then claimed that she was the victim. So, naturally, she got hit with 2 felony charges, and after months of failed plea negotiations, she has decided to fight this thing in front of a jury.
This is not.
Now, let's get into the Olivia Henderson case again. And this is where it breaks down to being the main issue. First off, she walked up onto a delivery, and what she filmed is supposedly what she see. There is statements by others and people who have edited her video to make it look like she was opening a door. The main case of this situation is simple. She posted a video, didn't call the police at the time to go and refer this for a health and welfare check, which is perfectly legal to do, is to go and get in a health and welfare check. If you've seen the videos and everything, that's the biggest problem. But well, bigger problem right now is I am just one subscriber from being able to go and live stream mobilely on YouTube, and it would be a great help if somebody would go and just please, if you watch this video later and you're not subscribed, please subscribe so you can assist us on the channel. Because this channel is brought to you by a sponsor. It's the gigmanslife.com, aka my wallet. Yes, this is sponsored by me, myself, and Fortunately, and some people are going, "Are you doing this for your own amusement?" Yes. Hopefully, other people's amusement. A lot of times you see me going, "Mm, yep," because I don't get enough sleep. Um, Sometimes I have those manic moments where I don't get sleep. Not until I really just basically pass out, and not from drinking or drugs. Just naturally, the body shuts off. And it happens. But, when you have people, though, want to go and discuss this case, a lot of things she didn't help her. Um, and that's the main point. She should have called the police. He shouldn't have posted the video. Even, you see, what makes it worse is she reported this to the police, and she sends it, senses that nothing's going on in her favor, and decided to post it. There's one thing, of saying, look, this is what I was doing and everything else. Removing the Schroeder's cat of saying, there's footage of her doing this. No, there isn't. Because if there was footage that would be proving, they have to disclose it to her lawyer, and then her lawyer would definitely be going, no, you're not winning this. And some lawyers would be saying, no, I'm not taking this because this is going to definitely prove. Her making the claims of, I was the one who was this, where the video shows nothing except dude on couch, passed out, door wide open. And for everybody saying, you just leave it at the door. I will tell you, do I have moments where I call up a neighbor and say, hey, can you go over to my place and close my door? Yeah. Can this type of shit happen? Yes, it can happen. It's not like rocket science. Persons drunk, persons like that. What does happen is somebody who, if you watch the videos, wonder if they're going to have the whole video again. Of course, no. They're going to show.
$30 million views. I mean, that is a lot of people.
Right there, folks. That is going to be, when it goes into court, that one thing that they're going to go and pick up on and ask her, what were you thinking during that time? You did a gesture that most people would go and say, how many hits am I going to get on this? How much money can I make as a creator? Because you got to also remember, she's a creator. She's on TikTok. She was making content. So it does bring up that question of, was this planned? Was this that you had any concern over the person's well-being? And that's the one thing, all these talking heads like me, I haven't seen them go like this and saying, what about a welfare check? This is where she's going to lose her case. Now, I know if you look back through and forget about the other things that, does she have a defense? You got to remember, she has two cases. There's two cases in this whole situation. That the first case is the criminal, the civil liability case that DoorDash is going to be hurt on is them being liable for what their drivers do, even when documentation shows that we are encouraged to document issues. Now, posting them on TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, or anywhere else, that's where the problem's going to be. They're going to go and say, well, where did you go and tell people you're working on our platform? You're operating on our platform. You cannot take videos and post them of customers and stuff like that. Although they removed her quickly after it was discovered, the factor still is, you don't do proper training, you're going to be held responsible for the actions of your drivers and people under your flag. So, there's just moments of going, just looking through the other things, because when you do see this, it's like, dude, and this is the main thing, is that her legal case, yeah, I can't imagine how the lawyer is sticking around. Raspberry Pi Factory. Oh, come on. Yeah, it'd be kind of bad to try to regulate Linux. just looking for some really well, this is kind of hard considering the fact I actually pay for the Apple Care on my computer, so getting that done. Oh, God.
Today, we are going to build the ultimate modernized version of the Nintendo 64. We're going to give it a huge graphical upgrade, overclock the CPU for maximum performance, cram it full of features it was never meant to have, and, well, that's just the start of a long list of changes that we're going to make to update this thing for 2026. See, the Nintendo 64 is my favorite console of all time, and it's actually the very first console that I modded on this channel. But since then, I have learned way more about console modding, so for the past week or so, I've been researching and planning how we can turn this thing up to 11. Every mod we're gonna do today is going to be bigger, better, and unfortunately for me, more complicated than what I did in the past. But you guys know the deal. Before we can start modding this thing, first we need to tear it down. And given that the system is nearly 30 years old at this point, we should probably fix a few issues while we're in here. After removing no less than a dozen screws, I was able to remove the upper RF shielding, and then after removing a few more, the whole motherboard lifted out like so. Here we get our first opportunity to check for any major issues. We can
Yeah, that's how big the actual board is.
capacitors are the leading cause of death for these old systems, but thankfully mine all looked really good. So next, I started removing these heatsinks and their dry, crusty thermal pads, which again is another common point of failure. Later, we're gonna do a big cooling upgrade, but first, I wanna show you something that almost nobody talks about when it comes to maintaining these old systems. An interesting quirk of the cartridge slot is that it also kind of has its own cartridge slot, and
Dude, day off again? Oh, correct. Concurrent viewers. This is one of the times where it's like different between, oh, I'm here. Now I'm here. Damn it. They have updated my tablet to death. Can't even use Bluetooth keyboard. Yeah, I don't sling that asphalt as well as I thought. Yeah, see. I see you. I see you. Yeah, I'm just looking for that one last viewer. I can get up to live for mobile. Not like I can't live stream from different locations because all I have to do is use the laptop. OBS can do the connections. Just, it's a lot easier just to use phone.
This area of the board is always disgusting. By cleaning it out, you can basically eliminate the need to blow on your cartridges in order to get them to work. So with that done, I thought it'd be fun to replace the stock LED with a more modern white one. I had this whole bit planned about how white LEDs weren't even commercially available when the N64 first came out, but as it turns out, this mod conflicts with another one we're gonna do later, so we'll just breeze right past it and dive into our first major upgrade that's gonna give this system a huge graphical upgrade. This is the RetroGem, and compared to the cheap HDMI mod I used on my last Nintendo 64, this thing is like a Rolls Royce. Not only does it add a modern HDMI output so that you can easily connect it to a modern TV, but it also makes the graphics look way better. However, installing it is a little bit tricky. We need to solder this ribbon cable directly to our GPU, and these pins are really small, so performing this mod is infinitely easier with a good digital microscope. I'll include a link to the one I'm using along with all of my other tools down in the video description. By tapping into these pins, we can capture raw digital frames and reroute them to the RetroGem, where we can perform all sorts of visual enhancements. I'm talking upscaling, smoothing, deinterlacing, and so much more. But here, I think it's important to note that these enhancements don't alter the artist's original intent, but actually better preserve it on modern displays. We'll do a side-by-side comparison later, but I'm getting ahead of myself because we also need to make some connections over here on the PIF chip. By tapping into these pins, the RetroGem can listen for controller inputs, and it also adds some nice quality of life features like being able to reset the console through software. And then last but not least, we need to give this thing some power. So after carefully folding the flex cable, you need to connect this arm to the output side of this nearby capacitor. And just like that, we are ready to test our first major upgrade. But spoiler alert, this did not go according to plan. Here we go, big moment of truth. Flip the switch. Debugging physical hardware can be an absolute pain, but learning how to build and debug software doesn't have to be, thanks to today's sponsor, Boot.dev.
Boot.dev. Boot.dev.
To tearing this thing down again and checking all my solder points, I decided, you know what, this is kind of an old HDMI cable. Maybe I should check with another one. And sure enough, watch this. HDMI 2 here. It boots just fine. So now that we know our new HDMI port works, next I want to address something that's plaguing these old consoles. After nearly 30 years of service, it's very common for these old power supplies to develop all sorts of problems. They
Power supply death.
rattle, hum, and in extreme cases, they won't even output the right voltages anymore, which can lead to all sorts of weird glitches as various components are starved for power. So rather than trying to fix this thing, I want to build something new from the ground up. And here, the first link in the chain is going to be this USB-C power delivery trigger board. By toggling these 3 tiny dip switches, we can set up this board to request 12 volts of power from a standard USB power adapter, which, lucky for us, is one of the 2 voltages required by the N64. The other is 3.3 volts, and for that, we're gonna use this little buck converter. This guy gets fed with power from the first board and then steps it down to 3.3 volts after you bridge this little contact. And just like that, we have everything we need to power the N64 in a much smaller package. But we still need to connect it back to the motherboard. And here, to create the cleanest possible install, I'm gonna remove the factory power plug. This is gonna free up a
Bye-bye. Factory. Bye-bye. Factory. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
ton of space and allow us to connect directly to the system's main power rails. Using a copper wick, I soaked up all the solder holding this port in place, which
Suck it up, baby. Suck it. Suck.
did unfortunately take a while as there was quite a bit to remove, but that's all that holds
She went from suck the blow.
this thing in place. So with a gentle little tug, it popped out like so. And now another weird quirk of the N64 is that it draws almost all of its power through that 3.3 volt line. If you do the math, that's a lot of current to try and push through a single wire, so we need to connect not one, but 2 output wires to our little buck converter. Thankfully, the 12 volt line pulls a lot less current, so a single wire is all you need there. And then the last step was just connecting all those wires to the power rails like I said before. And if you guys want to learn to do mods like this at home, you're going to want to check out my Modders Masterclass. It's a step-by-step instruction
Step-by-step instructions of how to not fuck up your shit.
Instructional course designed to teach you all of the hardware modification skills that I use on this channel. For a limited time, you can use the code Nintendo64 to save 50% off of the cost of admission. Plus, I've even got a special bonus offer that we'll talk about at the end of the video. But right now, we need to test this setup. And the cool thing about this mod is that it should now be possible to power this system with a battery bank. So after plugging
Battery bank.
one in, I held my breath and flipped the power switch for the very first time. Yes! With that win under our belt, next, I want to tackle something that made people really angry the last time I did this project, and probably rightfully so. In order to add wireless controller support, I used this big, ugly dongle. And the reason it's so big is because it has a slot for a memory card built right into it. So I went in search of a solution, and what I found is this guy. And as you can immediately see, it's way smaller. And the way it does that is by having the memory card integrated right into the adapter. But I was looking at it and I was thinking that this thing is so small, I think we might be able to just fit it right inside of the console. So to test my theory, first I had to open it up. And unfortunately, after trying
Cracker open.
unsuccessfully to gently pry it apart, I had to resort to some good old-fashioned brute force. With the case sufficiently mangled, the PCB inside pulled out without a fight. And to my delight, this thing works pretty much exactly the way I thought it would. There's 3 main wires that connect back to the controller port, and then the brains of the operation is this ESP32 board running the Blue Retro firmware. And if you've never heard of Blue Retro before, it's this really cool open source project that brings Bluetooth support to all sorts of different retro consoles. So I think all we have to do is connect these 3 wires to the pins on the motherboard where the controller ports are connected. The first wire should deliver power, the second wire is our data line, and then our final wire here is just a ground line. Now, unfortunately, I'm gonna need to do this 3 more times for each of the remaining controller ports, but for now, I'm just curious to see if this setup even works. Light came on right away, that's a good sign. Didn't brick the system, it boots. Okay, now, wireless controller. Oh, look at that. So now that we know that the wireless controller system works, next we just need to do it 3 more times. Now I've actually already ordered all the parts to make that happen, but they're still in the mail. So while we wait for those to arrive, I want to install another mod. And this one I am very excited for because up until recently, I didn't even know it was possible. As it turns out, you can actually overclock a Nintendo 64, but the way you do it is kind of unorthodox. This little QSB gets soldered directly to your CPU and forces it to run over 30% faster. But this install had me sweating bullets because in order to attach this thing, first you need to pry up to the legs on your CPU. One wrong move here and I could easily brick my console. But I think it's gonna be worth it because apparently this mod will give you huge performance increases in certain games. Plus, I think it's just super cool to say that you have an overclocked Nintendo 64. That being said, not every game will respond well to being overclocked, so now that we've got the chip installed, next we need a way to toggle it on and off. And for that, we are going to be tapping into the same reset line that we soldered to the RetroGen. By connecting this pad back to the QSB, we can turn the overclock on and off by simply holding the reset button for a couple of seconds. Theoretically, this should work, but I also might just be the first person to combine both of these mods at the same time, so we're gonna need to test that. But first,
Boom.
there's still one last part of this mod left to do. We need to replace that white LED that I installed earlier with a new bi-color one. After some quick desoldering, I dropped the new LED into the positive terminal on the motherboard. But rather than soldering it to the ground terminal, I'm actually gonna run these 2 color-coded wires back to the QSB. This allows the system to switch the LED's color depending on what mode it's in. Red means that it's running at stock clock speeds, and blue means that it's overclocked. So with all of my connections made, I hurried over to my desk to test this thing out, and here, again, things didn't really go according to plan. Hey, it boots, okay. At first, everything seemed great. The system booted just fine. But then, when I tried to activate the overclock, that's when I got this ominous black screen of death. Okay, well, that's not good. It's just black screening on me. And
Yep. That ain't cool.
no matter what I did, it just kept happening. Eventually though, I realized that the problem was actually my EverDrive 64, which we're going to talk more about soon. For some reason, it just doesn't like having the clock speeds changed while it's already running. So long as I'm in a game, everything seems to work just fine. Now we'll do some performance testing at the end of the video, and we're also going to address the increased heat output thanks to our higher clock speeds. But first, since I already had all of my soldering tools out, I want to remove the system's original AV port. We don't really need it anymore, and getting rid of it will free up a bunch of space for something that I have planned later. But that's easier said than done because it's held in place with 12 solder anchors. So rather than painstakingly draining each one with a solder wick, I'm just going to melt them all simultaneously with my hot air station. It did take me about 60 seconds to get them all up to temperature, but once I did, the old port pried out super easily. And now that that's done, we can get back to managing a different type of heat. To start, we're going to replace these old solid aluminum heat sinks with some thin copper ones. These should do a much better job of removing heat from the chips, and they also look really cool. To make sure they're operating at peak performance though, instead of using traditional thermal pads, I'm going to be using one of my favorite products, which is K5 Pro. Basically, this stuff is like a smooth spreadable thermal pad.
It's thermal grease, folks. Thermal grease. That's shit. Oh, yeah.
Except it's way more efficient at transmitting heat, which should help to keep the chips underneath nice and cool. And then, in addition to that, I also want to turn the N64 into an actively cooled system with the addition of this 40mm fan. By positioning it right about here, we can get it to pull air through all three of our heat sinks. However, powering it is going to be a little bit challenging since the N64 was never designed to have a fan. So here, we're going to have to get a bit creative and turn our attention to this component labeled U13. This guy is the system's main voltage regulator, so by tapping directly into it, we can steal all the juice we need without disrupting any other components. Oh man, seeing this little fan spin up makes me unreasonably happy. But I'm realizing that now that we've installed all of these mods, I think we have a little bit of a problem and also potentially an opportunity. See, I don't think that there's any way we can fit all of this stuff back in the original case. But also, looking at it, you can see that there's really not too much here. So I think we can actually design an entirely new case that's significantly smaller than the original and can fit all of our new parts. So for the next couple of days,
Yep. What is this one?
This little postage stamp is actually a full Raspberry Pi Zero 2 complete with eMMC storage and Wi-Fi. But you can't get one. Well, not unless you buy this development board from EdaTech or you live in China. This little guy doesn't have an HDMI port, Ethernet, or even USB, but then how do you turn it on? Well, it's a special version of the Compute Module line of boards. Little Raspberry Pi System on Modules they're called. All these compute modules are entire Linux computers about the size of a regular CPU that you plug into another board to give it life. And these things are everywhere, like in kiosks, signage, and even some 3D printers. If you just need a little bit of Linux for networking and remote control, these are perfect for that. And the CM0 is now the smallest version, a little bigger than a postage stamp. But unlike all the other compute modules, the CM0 has castellated edges like a Pico. That way, a company integrating this into their product can just pick and place it and solder it onto their main PCB instead of working with more delicate board-to-board connectors. But why is this only in China? I'll get to that, but first I want to thank EdaTech for sending both this dev board and a lone CM0 for testing. Without them, I don't think I'd ever be able to show these things to you. Their development board, the CM0 Nano, breaks out every feature on the RP3A0 chip at the heart of the Pi Zero and CM0. There's 1000 Ethernet through a little USB to Ethernet chip, 2 USB 2.0 ports, full-size HDMI, and USB-C for power and flashing the thing over eMMC. Then there are display and camera connectors, GPIO, and a few other things. To flash it, I had to switch this switch over here towards the battery slot, then use RPiBoot to get it ready. The eMMC on here is so slow compared to what I'm used to with the Pi 5 generation, like on the CM5. But when you go from CM5 to CM0, I guess that's to be expected. Anyway, once it's flashed, it's a full Linux computer complete with Raspberry Pi's desktop environment. EdaTech has a firmware support package you can install from their package repository, and once that's done, it's just a regular old Raspberry Pi. Of course, doing things like browsing the web on one of these is almost completely out of the question. The thing only has 512 megs of RAM, which is barely enough to even launch Chromium. I did try browsing around on my website, and it worked, but then when I went to close the browser, just clicking on the X a bunch of times, it took like a whole minute before that actually did anything. But since you have all these interfaces like Wi-Fi, Ethernet, USB, HDMI, and everything else, some products that just want to slap a well-supported Linux environment on top of their product line now have this thing. Do I think companies and makers here in the US and over in other parts of the world would also benefit from having access to the CM0? Yes. Do I think it'll happen? Doubtful. Like, the Pi Zero 2W itself was slammed pretty hard right after it launched, since this was during the post-COVID chip shortages. The CM0 was just launched right into the memory chip shortages. When Hackster asked Eben Upton about global availability, he was non-committal, and that was back before the RAM shortages really got bad. I followed up asking a Pi engineer about it, and it sounds like the big problem is this RP3A0 chip that's in both of these devices integrates a RAM chip stacked on top of the Pi's SoC. He said the CM0 would compete with the Pi Zero 2 for LPDDR2 memory, which is in shorter supply these days, and they want to make sure the Zero 2, which is already here and available, can stay in stock for makers and education. The CM0 is targeted squarely at the lower end market, integrated into products built on assembly lines. So because of that, it's anyone's guess if these chips will ever make it out of China. Well, this one is, but you get what I mean. I'm not going to do a full review of the board in this video because A, it's practically the same as the Pi Zero 2W, which I already reviewed on this channel, and B, it's not like you're going to be able to get one of these things anyway, at least not for the foreseeable future. I think there might have been a chance before the DRAM manufacturers went all in on an AI cash grab, but for now, stick to the Pi Zeros that you're used to. Until next time, I'm Jeff Kierling.
Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. And here's the meme of the day, brought to you by 5mind.com. Let's start off by saying this. I don't want to hear a single word from any of you leftoids complaining about Donald Trump sending the DOJ to do some poll-watching activities in certain particular districts in Michigan. I don't want to hear a single word. Organized voter fraud is clearly happening. The system is rife for abuse. And once again, James O'Keefe proves it, this time with the help of Cam Higbee. They just pulled off an absolutely incredible investigative stunt here that, again, justifies everything that we've been saying here, especially with the Islamic element in this whole ordeal. Let me show you guys exactly what's going on. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so we've got a very interesting investigative piece. We've got Cam Higbee and James O'Keefe partnering up together. Cam Higbee actually dresses up in full Islamic veil, pretending to be a deeply religious Muslim woman, and what they uncovered is just nearly unbelievable if it wasn't so damn.
Yeah. I got lots of them.
Unbelievable.
Just bring in 8 people, vouch for them, no IDs from anybody, and you're good. I caught all of this on video. It is easily the craziest video I've ever filmed in my entire life.
Say that I'm vouching for them. The name is William Ornaments. The question about the vouching program, yeah? Justice League dress up in traditional Muslim attire, including a transgender wearing a burqa. Disgusting. And put this vouching law to an extreme test on primary day, August 11th.
Gonna be a baller, shot caller, 20-inch blades on the Impala.
The vouching. Yeah.
You're vouching for?
I vouch for them.
Oh, great.
Is that okay?
Yeah. Vouching my ass.
Something that got you major nerd points in the late 90s was overclocking an early Celeron processor, and even more so if you ran them in a dual CPU setup. I previously tried and failed to pull this off, but now I'm looking for revenge. Will the third time be the charm? At far lower cost. I found that while the latter was indeed true, claims about easy overclocking were which were commonly known as slockets. The era of Slot 1 CPUs didn't actually last all that long, just from 1997 to 99, and the form factor existed primarily as a way for Intel to improve production yields on its Pentium 2 processors. But by 1998, the company had gotten that issue largely sorted, so it started transitioning its CPU lineup to the new Socket 370 package, which was cheaper to manufacture both for the processors themselves and the motherboards.
The Slockets.
During the transition period, Intel offered some CPUs in both versions, and I managed to pick up a pair of Celerons in Socket 370 form. These are otherwise the same 300 MHz parts with 66 MHz bus speed that I'd been tinkering with previously, and supposedly should be just as easily overclockable. In order to use them in my Slot 1 motherboard, I picked up a pair of generic-looking Slockets from eBay for pretty cheap, and got the CPUs dropped in. Cooling was a bit of a concern, since the space around Slot 1 CPUs generally required slimline heatsinks, and I thought the new old stock coolers I bought would be perfect. But I quickly realized my mistake. These won't work at all, and begrudgingly paid way more than I wanted to for a different pair. But these would give me the clearance I needed and clipped into place without much fuss. My testing rig of choice was the machine I built last time, a copper-colored Lian Li case housing a Supermicro motherboard. I pulled out the Pentium 2 CPU and slotted in the Celeron, and the computer fired up just fine. Once I got into Windows, I launched CPU-Z, and interestingly, it knew that there was a PGA or pin grid array processor installed.
Don't know, man.
But
you know, you got to make sure that you have no aluminum shards after trimming.
the specs otherwise looked identical to the Slot 1 Celerons I'd used previously, so I shut the machine down to pick up where I left off last time. That is, getting two CPUs working in this thing. Intel had intentionally hampered the Celerons from working this way in order to sell more Pentiums, but some clever folks quickly came up with workarounds. The Slot 1 Celerons I had were on loan to me, and I wasn't willing to try the modifications necessary. But these new Socket 370 chips were mine, and I found that it was possible to do the same mods to the Slockets. Worst case scenario, and I screw up, I could buy another Slocket for a lot cheaper than a Slot 1 Celeron 300A, which are going for decent prices these days. But out of curiosity, I wanted to see what would happen if I installed the second processor as is, without any mods. Imagine my surprise when the computer just worked, and showed both CPUs. As it turns out, some manufacturers of Slockets got cheeky and baked those multiprocessor modifications right into the design, and I had unknowingly, and luckily, ended up with a pair of these, which had been sold by PC Chips and ECS. The next question was, what kind of performance increase could one expect going from one CPU to two? To answer that, I had to get over another hurdle. While the motherboard detected both processors, Windows 2000 didn't. CPU-Z wasn't any better, and when I checked Device Manager, I got my answer. It was calling the computer a uniprocessor PC. I had to reinstall Windows to fix this, as apparently it only checks whether a computer has more than one CPU during the initial setup. But that didn't take too long, and afterward...
Yep. They know how to screw people on that end. Oh yeah.
It was reporting as a multiprocessor PC with two CPU graphs in Task Manager. Everything looked good in PCMark 2002 as well, so I kicked off a benchmark run. I wasn't expecting exactly double the results of a single processor since there's always some overhead, but it should be substantially faster. So imagine my surprise when the score was just 799, only 3 points higher than the 796 I got with only one CPU installed. That means PCMark isn't able to use both processors, despite being capable of detecting them. And that's a theme we'll see again later on. CPU-Z has its own benchmarks which are multiprocessor aware, and they painted the picture I was expecting. a single CPU score of 3.5 with both at 5.8. But synthetic benchmarks are one thing and actual applications are another, so I fired up Quake 3 Arena. With a GeForce FX 5200 video card, this system...
Yeah, kind of do that already. I didn't buy the OS. I paid for the OS. I didn't buy the OS. It came with the machine.
System's gaming performance bottleneck is the CPU. So at its stock 300 MHz, the Celeron pulled off a frame rate of 37.1 in the Quake 3 demo. But that was just using one CPU, and interestingly, that game actually supports multiprocessing. So I ran the demo again and got a whopping 3.7 more frames per second. Seems like Quake 3 isn't really capable of multiprocessing either. With that, I decided to move on to the other part of this experiment, seeing how far I could overclock these chips. It's been held that an increase of 50%, boosting the 300 MHz version to 450, was quick and easy. My own experience suggests otherwise, with only one CPU out of 3 I tried previously wanting to go that fast with just a bus speed increase. I hoped these Socket 370 versions would give me better luck, but to hedge my bets, I chose to test them one at a time. On this motherboard, changing the bus speed from 66 MHz to 100 is as simple as removing this jumper. I was excited to see that the system did report a 450 MHz clock speed, but disappointed to find that Windows blue screened while booting. This is a telltale sign that things aren't running stably.
Usually that's the case. I mean, not fessing up to anything.
Oftentimes, increasing the CPU voltage from its base 2 volts will fix this, but a limitation with this motherboard is it doesn't let you adjust that in software.
So yeah. Let's see. Yeah, by the way, YouTube is getting sued for false advertising in the state of California about their ad-free subscription service because they just need to add a few words to watch that lawsuit go bye-bye. Because they're talking about the sponsorships and advertisements that creators bake into their videos. And saying, well, I paid for ad-free. I shouldn't see ads during the videos that the creator goes and gets paid directly for. Which, yes, I know you're going to go and say, I got ad blocker. Well, here's where that gets into that nice, lovely situation. Is that the lawsuit is going to run into the factor that all they're going to do is change that statement from ad-free from YouTube pushed ads, or going non-YouTube, no added advertisements from YouTube. I'm trying to get Sam to sub to you and YouTube. Get over the line. Yes, that's what it is. It's majorly that 50 user. I built a camper and got attacked. Nobody's applying. Okay, let's see.
Today we'll be talking about jobs that are so desperate for workers that they'll hire you on the spot. And by the end of this video, I promise at least one of these is going to be a legit fit for you, if not several of them. Now, some are hands-on, some are 100% remote, some you can do from anywhere. A few pay well over $100,000 a year, and every single one is open to you without needing a specific college degree or years of experience. And most you can break into in weeks, not years. This is coming from someone who spent the last decade studying career paths after getting burned by the college system myself. I went over $300,000 in debt to get a doctorate that I barely even use. So I built the channel that I wish I'd had at 18 years old. And since then, we've helped people land careers that they actually want, with over 1,000 verified testimonials from my business partners and I to back it up. So I know what I'm talking about when I break these down. Now, here's the pattern that I see over and over with people who land these jobs fast. The smart ones don't chase trends, they chase shortages. Because the second an industry runs out of workers, the power shifts. The employer isn't holding the leverage anymore, you are. So a lot of the time, shortages or jobs that just a lot of people don't want to do, but they're still really important, are going to be your best bet. So today I'm going to be walking you through exactly where these shortages are, what they really pay, how to get in, and how some people that are already doing these jobs are stacking a second income right on top of them with very little extra work. Now, real quick, there is a flood of AI slop videos out there listing fake jobs with made up numbers, and everything in this one is sourced and on the screen because I checked it myself. So if you appreciate me making this type of content, then let me know by gently cheersing that like button, and let's jump into it right now. All right, so first one we're gonna talk about is the professional odor tester. And if you know my channel, you know that sometimes I like to start these videos off with kind of a weird or a funny one. And the reason I like to do that is because I want to get the creative juices flowing and just make you realize that there's so many different types of careers out there. So that's what this one is. And yes, companies will literally pay you to smell things. Armpits, breath, cat litter, deodorant that's supposed to work but might not. And this position is called a professional odor tester, or the fancier version is a sensory panelist. And their nose is the entire quality control department. Now, you might be thinking that this is one of those fake jobs that some blog made up just to fill a list, but it's not. ZipRecruiter has live odor tester jobs hiring right now, and these are actual postings that you can apply to today at the time of making this video. So think of your nose like a smoke detector. A cheap one just goes off randomly and you end up ripping the battery out. A calibrated one catches the exact thing that it's supposed to every time with no false alarms. And companies will pay real money for a human smoke detector that's dialed in. And no, you don't need a chemistry degree and some genetically gifted super nose, like you're some kind of bloodhound human hybrid. Panels screen you for a normal, consistent sense of smell and then train you on the vocabulary. And there are no degree postings online right now. So here's how to start as an odor tester.
Sam.
Search sensory panelist and odor tester on websites like Indeed and ZipRecruiter. The big employers are flavor and fragrance houses and food companies. MMR Research, Givaudan, Hershey, IFF all run panels. And most start part-time around $16 an hour while you train, then pay climbs as your palate gets certified. You pass a smell and taste acuity screen at the interview, and there's no degree required for entry panels. Now on pay, there's a floor and there's a ceiling. And I'm gonna be honest, they're far apart. Glassdoor puts sensory panelists around $68,000 a year on average, with a typical range of $54,000 to $88,000. Entry panels start closer to $16 an hour, but ZipRecruiter shows top odor testing specialists getting into six figures. Now, like I said, I know that 95% of people watching this are probably not gonna become an odor tester or a sensory specialist. With that being said, like I said before, I like to include these types of careers just to get the creative juices flowing and let you know that there's a lot of different things you can do out there, and they're not all super boring. Some of them are are weird or cool. With that being said, let's talk about one that is super boring and also has a massive amount of demand right now, and that is data center HVAC technician, aka the AI boom's repairman. And this is where the list stops being weird and starts being serious money. So data center HVAC technicians, specifically the liquid cooling side for AI data centers. Every AI model you've ever heard used runs in a building that generates insane amounts of heat. And if the cooling part fails, billions of dollars of hardware cooks itself. And you might say that's saturated and everyone's gonna go in the trades now. Well, then explain this. According to Randstad, it now takes longer to hire an HVAC pro than a software developer. 56 days versus 54. So the AI boom is creating a surge in demand for HVAC techs faster than the industry can train them. Think about it like the gold rush. Everybody's obsessed with people mining the gold, the AI engineers, the model builders, but the person who got rich and stayed rich was the one selling the shovels and keeping the water running. And in the AI gold rush, the cooling tech is that person. And you might think that the pay can't be that great for a repair job. CNBC Make It followed a guy named Robert Quadra making $80,000 a year repairing air conditioning. And there's countless examples of other people making really good money in HVAC, and the data centers are paying above market average for HVAC technicians right now. But it would be so hard to break into, right? Well, my brother Zach has been in the trades for almost 30 years, and now he teaches people how to become an HVAC technician. He's got a whole video breaking down the industrial versus the residential versus the commercial HVAC side, and Zach can make videos like that because he actually lived it. Now hold on to Zach for a second, because what he did after getting into the trade is the real story, and I'm gonna be coming back to that in about 60 seconds. But here's how to start as a data center HVAC tech. Get into an HVAC program at a community college or a trade school, or if you live in certain states, you can actually get hired as an HVAC tech directly from the business as long as they agree to train you properly. Now, this is something you can easily look up on AI, whether you live in a state that allows this or not. There's a lot of weird union stuff, so that's just something you have to look up. Just tell it what area you live in and it'll tell you. But even if you go into an HVAC program at a community college or a trade school, most of those are gonna run under a year. Then get your EPA 608 certification. This is required to handle.
Yeah, I know. Well, it's usually in construction, and they usually have other substance abuse problems that make them go broke. I have seen many blue-collar people go broke because of substance abuse problems.
Refrigerants, and then chase the liquid cooling and data center specialization, because that's where the AI money is pooling right now. And then apply directly to data center operators and the mechanical contractors who service them. Now, the hiring gap means that they'll train the right person fast, and the pay is real, not hype. And Glassdoor puts HVAC technicians around $72,000 a year on average, with a typical range of about $60,000 to $88,000. And the data center specialists sit at the top of that. Now, remember I told you to hold on to my brother Zach? Well, here's the part that matters. Zach started talking about how to get into the trades and his experience working in HVAC, and 29 days after uploading his very first video on YouTube, Zach hit $214 in a day, which is crazy because most people take months or even years just to get monetized alone, and he was making a full-time income in less than 1 month. And now, a year after posting, he just had a record month of $18,000+ in a single month. And he did all of it spending less than 4 hours a week on YouTube, teaching the exact trade stuff that we've been talking about just now. And if you want to learn exactly how he did it, we have a free workshop this week where we're going to be going over step by step exactly how it was done. And we're going to be giving away an AI that's the niche validator that's going to help you pick your niche so that you can do it as well. Click the link in the description in the pinned comment below to check that out.
All right, guys, quick break. This video is sponsored by me. I wanted to let you know that I'm going to be doing a live
everyone
training.
is familiar with the Raspberry Pi. Pretty great stuff, but it got quite expensive over the years. So I was pretty impressed when I saw this tiny board here on AliExpress, which is supposedly also a Linux computer that only costs €6 though.
This board does not come with Wi-Fi, just have Ethernet ports to wire up. It does not come with a display output, like the HDMI port on most Raspberry Pis. Instead, we pretty much only got a USB-C port, a camera interface, and an SD card slot on the other side. And yeah, Linux seems to be running just fine. I can say that I'm rather impressed here. Keep in mind though that the horsepower of this thing is still pretty weak, but overall I would recommend it. If you look
So this dad got a fraud alert on his phone, opened a photo of the mess his daughter supposedly left in a lift, and got ready to punish her. But although the picture looked damning, his teenage daughter spotted one tiny detail in the corner that flipped the entire scam upside down. You see, in May of 2026, Ella Gore and a friend took
This is one thing. If you're going to be out here doing the gig work, don't try scamming. You make the rest of us look bad if you do.
a lift home from the beach in Boca Raton, Florida. Shortly after they walked in the door, her dad Bert discovered a $75 damage fee tacked onto the ride, and his first thought was these girls are grounded for the whole weekend. The driver claimed the teens had spilled a drink and fries all over his back seat. But although the girls swore they left no mess, Bert demanded proof and Lyft forwarded him the driver's photo of the disaster. The image showed food and liquid smeared all across the seats, and it looked like an open and shut case. Then Ella zoomed in and noticed something in the bottom corner of the picture, a tiny AI logo. The driver had allegedly generated the fake mess with Google's AI and forgot to crop out the watermark it stamps on its images. When Ella saw it, she said, "That is fake, it's not real." Her dad sent the evidence to Lyft and the company agreed the photo was bogus, apologized, and refunded every penny. The driver was permanently banned from the platform, betrayed by the signature of the
My armor has lost its integrity. I may need to begin again.
Indeed. I can find.
Okay. Wait, sorry. Your name is Kristen? Yes. What was your name? Abby. She has a C necklace on. Girl! Okay. Wait, sorry. Your name is Kristen? Yes. What was your name? Abby. She has a C necklace on. Girl! Okay. Wait, sorry.
Did you know Florence Nightingale did her greatest work while bedridden for 50 years? The world celebrated her as the lady with the lamp and moved on. But in that quiet sick room, she invented medical statistics. She created data charts that governments actually used. She rewrote sanitation laws for entire armies and nations. No stage, no momentum, no healthy body, just a sharp mind and a room full of evidence. The Stoics understood this. Constraint is not the enemy of purpose. Sometimes the walls around you are exactly where the real work begins.
Hi, I'd like to play Doki Doki Literature Club.
Aren't you the officer who was shot outside?
Yes, sir. John Nolan. Lucky to be here.
What's your part in all this?
Yesterday, I was assigned to protect Mr. Glasser, but last year I was there when he was arrested.
Come up here.
Up here.
Make
Witness
some
box.
money. And I hope you are paying attention to some of the things going out there, you know, because if we don't pay attention, people, we might get screwed. And that's what they want. So you have yourself a good one. Thank you very much for watching and have a good day.